5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Start. The Honorable Court is presently dealing with a matter where certain individuals stand accused of involvement in a conspiracy, the object of which is alleged to be the misappropriation of public funds through fraudulent and illegal means. The charge sheet filed by the prosecution suggests that the accused parties conspired to carry out acts that resulted in the unlawful diversion and misapplication of substantial sums of money, which were meant to be utilized for specific public purposes. The allegation further extends to the preparation and submission of false documents that enabled these acts to be carried out without immediate detection. In this matter, the primary allegation involves a scheme where the accused parties are said to have collaborated to inflate the cost of goods and services in a transaction involving public funds. The first accused, a person holding a position of authority within a public office, is alleged to have played a central role in orchestrating the illegal scheme by authorizing false invoices and documents for payments that were then processed for amounts greater than what was actually owed for the services rendered. The second accused, a private party involved in the execution of the services for which the payments were made, is claimed to have been an active participant in this unlawful process. The third individual, whose role is primarily administrative, is accused of assisting in the falsification of documents and facilitating the transfer of funds to accounts under the control of the first individual. The prosecution contends that the evidence against the accused is both direct and circumstantial, relying upon statements made by witnesses and financial records that trace the movement of the funds in question. The statements of witnesses have been presented to the court, asserting that the first individual, who held a position of trust, was the principal architect of the fraudulent activities. It is claimed that the accused worked in tandem, using their respective positions of authority to enable the fraudulent transfers of public funds. Additionally, the financial records show the movement of funds that match the dates of the alleged fraudulent transactions, and they identify accounts that were used to withdraw these funds in a manner inconsistent with legitimate government procedures. In response to these allegations, the defense for the accused parties has strenuously denied the charges. The counsel for the defense submits that there is insufficient evidence to support the prosecution's claims. It is further argued that the witnesses presented by the prosecution are unreliable, and that their testimony cannot be regarded as credible or binding. According to the defense, the circumstantial evidence put forth by the prosecution is too tenuous and does not prove any criminal intent or wrongdoing. The defense maintains that the actions of the accused, if scrutinized, are consistent with proper conduct and that no overt act of conspiracy or fraudulent behavior has been demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt. Moreover, the defense contends that the charges of conspiracy are unsustainable as the prosecution has failed to establish that the accused persons had a shared intention to commit a crime. The defense further asserts that the documents produced by the prosecution do not sufficiently establish that any false representations were made with the intent to deceive any public authority or to misappropriate funds. According to the defense, the individuals in question were merely executing their duties within the scope of their roles, and any discrepancies in the documentation were likely due to clerical errors rather than criminal conduct. The court, having heard the arguments of both the prosecution and the defense, is now tasked with determining whether there exists enough evidence to substantiate the charges against the accused. The court must decide whether the available evidence is sufficient to conclude that a conspiracy indeed existed and whether the accused parties acted with criminal intent in facilitating the diversion of funds. A crucial element to be examined is whether the actions of the accused amount to a deliberate scheme to deceive and defraud the public, or whether their involvement can be explained by factors other than criminality. In considering the evidence, the court has found that certain documents, which were submitted by the prosecution, appear to indicate a coordinated effort to falsify financial records and mislead authorities. The financial transactions in question, when examined in detail, reveal an irregular pattern of withdrawals and deposits that seem to correspond with the dates and amounts involved in the alleged fraudulent activities. Furthermore, several witnesses have provided testimony that directly implicates the first accused in the manipulation of the records and the disbursement of funds. However, the court notes that the reliability of some of the evidence is still subject to scrutiny, as certain documents have been challenged by the defense on grounds of authenticity. The prosecution, in its submissions, has also pointed to the nature of the accused individuals' roles and responsibilities within their respective organizations as evidence of their capacity to commit such fraud. The prosecution argues that those in positions of authority should be held to a higher standard of accountability, and their actions, when found to be in breach of public trust, must be treated with utmost seriousness. The court will, therefore, need to determine whether the circumstantial and testimonial evidence provided by the prosecution is sufficiently compelling to support the charges. The issue of intent is critical in this case, as the prosecution must demonstrate that the accused were not merely negligent or careless, but were involved in a deliberate and premeditated effort to defraud the public. In conclusion, the matter is adjourned for further examination, and the next hearing will focus on the presentation of additional evidence. The court will, at that time, make a decision on whether the case should proceed to trial based on the evidence presented and whether the charges should be formally framed against the accused. The court's decision will depend heavily on the evaluation of the credibility of the evidence and the legal arguments put forth by both the prosecution and the defense. Stop.